Hi, my name is Jennifer, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm doing my autumn TBR and I'm so excited for this TBR. So I love autumn, it's my favourite season. I think that's partly because it means summer is over and I hate summer, but I just love autumn when it's getting colder, being able to get cosy on the couch, wearing a jumper and blankets and hot drinks and just reading some lovely books. I think I might be the most excited for this TBR out of any that I've done. I don't do TBRs very often, but I do tend to do them in autumn and or spooky season. So what I've done is I've gone through my physical TBR and picked off all the books that I really want to read by the end of the year. There are a few library books in here as well, but I am going to try and get through some of my physical TBR before the end of the year, because the last few months I've only pretty much been reading library books. So here we have some classics, some horror, some mystery, some historical fiction, and we also have some fantasy, which is unusual for me. And then there's one book which doesn't really fit into any of these genres, but I just want to read it by the end of the year, so I'm going to talk about it anyway. So there are a couple of books that I want to reread before the end of the year. First one is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I picked up this cloth-bound edition earlier this year or last year, second hand. So I have read Little Women several times before, but not since I was a child. So I think it's sort of 20 plus years since I read this book. And I've just been feeling like the time is right to reread it again. I think it's quite a cosy book. I will probably read this one sort of end of November going into December. I should say this TBR is probably to take me to the end of the year, so October, November, December. I know December's not autumn, but I'm including those books in here as well. And then in September my plan is to try and read as many of the other sort of library books I have out at the moment. So this one I think it'll probably be nice to read sort of end of November going into December, because it opens at Christmas time, obviously, with the famous first line, which is, let's see if I remember it, "Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents," grumbled Joe, lying on the rug. Shall we see? Oh, there's an introduction. Okay. Here we are. Right. Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents, grumbled Joe, lying on the rug. And I did not cheat before filming this video. So there we go. So yes, Little Women, looking forward to rereading that. And then, so there were two books on this TBR which were not on this TBR until, actually three, which were not on this TBR until this very morning. And this is one of them. This is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. So I had my book club at the library this morning, and the book that we're going to be reading for next month is The Book Thief. So I have read this before. I think several of the group have read this before. We're at the point now where we are doing some rereads because the selection of books that we can choose from, the group's been going for 10 years, so we've read a lot of the books. We've read pretty much all the books that we're interested in, so it's now either reread or go for books that no one's interested in reading. So anyway, we're going to be reading The Book Thief, which I have read before several years ago. It's quite long, it's like 500 odd pages, and I didn't know this when I read it at the time. I think this is meant to be YA, which did not occur to me when I read it the first time around. I'm not entirely sure if that's true or not. I think I've seen the film of this and quite enjoyed it as well. So this is set in the Second World War, from about a young girl who is, I think, is the book thief, and Death is a character in the story. So does Death narrate the story? I actually don't, the blurb doesn't give hardly anything away, and I don't remember much about the specifics other than I know I enjoyed it. And this feels like the right time of year to reread this as well, so I'm looking forward to that one. Next we have some classics that I'm planning on reading. I am not a big classics reader, but there are a few classics here. I mean, a couple of them are really short, but this one is not. This is The Well of Loneliness by Radclyffe Hall. I'm going to be doing a buddy read in October with Tiffany from Towering TBR on this one. So this, I think, was published in the early 20th century, and it was banned on publication because it is about a woman called Stephen, who was named that by her father, who was desperate for a son, and she hunts and fences, reads books, wears trousers and longs to cut her hair. So she, I think, falls in love with another woman. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It says on the front, the Irish Times calls this book the Bible of lesbianism. So I'm looking forward to that one. Another classic. So I've got quite a little collection now of these Penguin English Library books, which I pick up second hand. So they are, can you see them? They are there. I don't know if you can see them. So I'm only picking up the ones that I'm interested in reading, obviously. But this is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's super short. I mean, you know what this book is about, right? But I've never read it. And I've been meaning to read this for a couple of years, and I think I'm going to read this in October because I think it'll be good for spooky season. I'm not going to tell you the plot. I'm sure you're aware of the plot. It was first published in 1886. Published as a shilling shocker. Another one which is definitely going to be read in December is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I picked this one up second hand quite recently, so I'll probably read this in the week leading up to Christmas. I have only read one Dickens before, which was Oliver Twist, which I read when I was a child, and I've never really read any Dickens since then. So this little short thing seems like a good one to try. I mean, you know the plot of A Christmas Carol. This is a really nice edition. I really like this cover. Yeah, the one Dickens that I think sounds like the most me out of all of the Dickens books is Great Expectations. So I would like to give that a go at some point. Probably not this year, but maybe next year. But yeah, looking forward to trying a little bit of Dickens. Then I have a couple of sort of short story collections. So I've got In a Glass Darkly by Sheridan Fanu. So this contains like 5 or 6 stories. So I'm saying stories, but each story on the contents has its own chapters, and one of the stories is Carmilla, which I have read. So I'm probably not going to reread Carmilla this time around because I think I read it last year or the year before. So I don't know if they're stories or novellas really. So the ones we've got are Green Tea, The Familiar, Mr. Justice Harbottle, The Room in Le Dragon Volant, and then Carmilla. So I'm looking forward to reading some more Sheridan Le Fanu because I did really enjoy Carmilla, which is a vampire story. And then another short story collection is The Murders in the Rue Morgue and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe. So this collection has some of Poe's horror and also some of his mysteries. So we've got horror like The Fall of the House of Usher, The Telltale Heart, and then some of the mysteries like The Murder in the Rue Morgue, which I have read before. Murder in the Rue Morgue, I think it was one of the earliest detective stories, and it also features a locked room mystery. And if you've read The Murder in the Rue Morgue, it's also faintly ridiculous but quite enjoyable. So anyway, horror, madness, violence and dark forces hidden in humanity abound in this collection of brilliant tales. So that sounds really good, so I'm looking forward to dipping in and out of that one as well. So now I have a few horror books that I would like to read. I mean, a couple of those classics cross into horror as well, obviously. So the first one I'll talk about, so I don't forget, is actually not published yet, so I don't have a copy, and it's Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer. So this is a 4th book in the Southern Reach series, trilogy as was. We'll call it a quartet now, shall we? So the surprise 4th instalment, it comes out, I think, late October. And I read the Southern Reach trilogy last year, I think. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fascinating series. Some of the books I've liked more than others. So I think the first one, Annihilation, I really liked. Second one, less so, and then I like the third one again. But I think what Jeff Vandermeer is doing in that series is really, really interesting. It's about this sort of expedition into Area X where there's been some sort of environmental disaster, and these explorers go there and weird stuff happens. So I really want to read the 4th instalment. I haven't seen it on my library sort of catalogue yet as being on order, so I may send them an email and say, are you getting this in, and if you're not, would you please purchase it? Because the library does have the first 3 books in the series. I think I had to ask them to buy like book 2, which they randomly didn't have. So I may put in a library request because I would like to read that one. A book which is featured on my Spooky Season TBR 3 years running is The Anomaly by Michael Rutger. Now, this is a book that I acquired a few years ago now in like a random book box subscription that I was signed up to. This is before I had my channel. So this has not come into my life by choice, but by chance. But it did survive the big unhaul of 2024 when I sort of tried a chapter of a lot of books, and this remains on my shelf. So I feel like it might be an interesting read, although the fact that it says it's for fans of Dan Brown on the front obviously puts me off a little bit. But this is about a TV crew who go to the Grand Canyon searching for ancient treasures which are said to be hidden in this cave, and then it's like what they find in the cave. So that sounds like an interesting setup. I feel like we might get some good horror out of that idea. So if I don't read this year, it needs to be on hold because it's getting ridiculous. And finally, in horror, I have a library book that I want to read, and this is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, and I love this super 80s cover. So I read a book by Grady Hendrix recently, How to Sell a Haunted House, I think it was called, and I really, really enjoyed that book a lot. Thoroughly enjoyed that book, so I was keen to pick up some more Grady Hendrix. This is the one that the library had. I think this is one of his sort of more popular ones. I love how it's set up to look like an old like VHS tape. So this is, and I mean annoyingly there's a sticker over part of the blurb. So this is about 2 high school sophomores who've been best friends since 4th grade, but after an evening of skinny dipping goes disastrously wrong, Gretchen begins to act different. I'm assuming she's being taken over by the devil, given the title. So yeah, really, really looking forward to reading more Grady Hendrix. Next, should we go to mystery? So mystery is my favourite genre. I read it all year round. But there are 4 books on my shelf in that genre, which I am super keen to read. Surprised I've not got to yet. I mean, none of them have been on my shelf super long, but I really would like to get to them before the end of the year because I'm really excited about all of them. So first is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. I've heard really good things about this. I think this might be like sort of a more of thriller leaning, and I think it's kind of dark academia as well. So it's set in 2 time frames. So 10 years after graduation, there is a college reunion with 6 friends. They're meeting up again. It says, but not everyone is ready to move on. So there was a murder of another pupil that had happened when they were at university. And then when these friends are reunited, they're forced to confront not only what happened that night, but the secrets they would do anything to hide. So that sounds really good. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to all of these. Next is A Helping Hand by Celia Dale. I really, really like this cover. So this was first published when? In 1966. And this, I think, maybe a bit more like of a psychological noir type thing. It's about, so we have a middle-aged couple who lead a seemingly unremarkable life. When their elderly lodger Flo dies and leaves them everything, they head to Italy on holiday. And it says there they meet Mrs. Fingal, a wealthy widow who lives unhappily with her grown-up niece. And they start to bond. And then when they go back home, she moves in with them. So I'm thinking Mrs. Fingal might be up to no good. It says it's for fans of Shirley Jackson, Roald Dahl and Muriel Spark. A sharp and nasty slice of darkness. That looks so good. Now we have a couple of Japanese sort of crime novels. The Tokyo Zodiac Murders by Soji Shimada. This translated by Ross and Shika Mackenzie. So I've read one book by Soji Shimada before, which was the what's it called? Murder in the Crooked House, which I did enjoy. I think this is the author's most famous book. So again, we have two timelines. In Japan 1936, an old eccentric artist living with 7 women has been found dead in a locked room. I love a locked room mystery. And then, in his testament, one of the things they find is a complicated plan to kill these women. Soon after the plan is carried out, the 7 women are found dismembered and buried across rural Japan. And then in 1979, these murders, which are called the Tokyo Zodiac murders, have been obsessing a nation for decades, but none of the murders have been solved. So it sounds really good, I think. So it says you have all the clues, but can you solve the mystery? I think this has a good twist in. I've heard really good things about it. I'm looking forward to it. Another Japanese crime novel is The No Mask Murder by Akimitsu Takagi. This is translated. Are these both Pushkin Vertigo? They are both published by Pushkin Vertigo, who publish lots of great translated crime fiction. So this one is translated by Jessie Kirkwood. I've read one book by this author before, which I liked. It was a little bit long. This is super short. So it says, death and madness have haunted the Chizu family for years. Now a strange figure has been seen wandering their mansion at night, wearing a sinister no mask that is said to bear a centuries-old curse. And there is someone found dead in a locked room. My favourite thing. And I think, if I remember rightly, the author inserts himself as a character in this book, which is something I quite enjoy in crime fiction. So that I'm really looking forward to. And then the final book that's specifically in the mystery genre is one that I don't have, but it's waiting at the library for me. Annoyingly, I was at the library this morning for my book club and it wasn't there. And then after I got home, I saw the notification that it had arrived. And if I'd seen the notification before I headed home, I could have picked it up. But alas, I did not. And Ragnar Jonasson has a new book out and it's called Death at the Sanatorium. I don't know who the translator is because I'm looking at the library catalogue. Is it the contributor? The contributor is Victoria Cribb, if that means the translator. So I really like Ragnar Jonasson's crime novels. He's an Icelandic author and he's written a couple of series which I've enjoyed. This one I think sounds like a standalone. It's called Death at the Sanatorium and it sounds quite sort of golden age in terms of what it's about. So once a hospital dedicated to treating tuberculosis, the sanatorium now sits haunted by the ghosts of its past. So we have a single wing that is open and houses 6 employees, but when one of them is found brutally murdered, a series of terrifying events are set in motion. With only 6 suspects, how has the trail run dry? So it's a closed circle mystery, so there's a limited set of suspects, which is something I really like. And then 2 decades later, the murder remains unsolved until a young criminologist takes on the case. So that sounds really good, and I like Ragnar Jonasson's writing, so I'm looking forward to that one. There is a queue for that one, so that when I pick it up, that may have to be read sooner rather than later. Right, now on to some historical fiction, and actually I think these 3 historical novels probably all fit into mystery as well. We have My Name is Red by Orhan Pamuk. So this has been sitting on my shelves for a few years now, and I have another book by this author as well called The Black Book, but I've never read anything by him. So I need to read one of these books so I know if I like him or not. So this author has won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and I think this is his, if not his most well-known, one of his most well-known works. It was first published in 2001 and it's translated from Turkish by Erdag M. Goknar. I've probably pronounced that wrong. But this sounds so good. So let me just read you the first couple of lines. So the first chapter is called I Am a Corpse. It says, I am nothing but a corpse now, a body at the bottom of a well. Though I drew my last breath long ago and my heart has stopped beating, no one, apart from that vile murderer, knows what's happened to me. I mean, it sounds so good. Just that. Why have I not read this yet? Honestly. So it's set in Istanbul in the late 1590s. The Sultan secretly commissions a great book, a celebration of his life and his empire. But when one of the miniaturists who's working on the book is murdered, their master has to seek outside help. Did the dead painter fall victim to professional rivalry, romantic jealousy, or religious terror? So yeah, it just the narrative voice in this one sounds really, really interesting. So I must read that soon. A book that I've never heard anyone else mention is The Tumbling Girl by Bridget Walsh. I picked this up in a bookshop earlier this year. This is the first in a series. I think there are 2 books out in the series at the moment. So this is set in 1876 in Victorian London, and we have a woman who is working as a scriptwriter for the Variety Palace Music Hall. Her world is turned upside down when her best friend is found dead, and she's convinced it's murder. So she teams up with a dashing private detective to try to solve the crime. Together they navigate the streets of London, from its high-class gentlemen clubs to its murky underbelly. But as the bodies pile up, yes, we have more than one murder, they must rely on one another if they're going to track down the killer and make it out alive. Sounds excellent. I really, really love this cover a lot. And then the final historical novel is one that wasn't on this TBR until I saw it at the library this morning. So this is a book I've heard of. I have read from the author before and enjoyed what I've read before. But I watched Mercedes' autumnal TBR this morning before I went to the library. And this book was on that TBR. And I was like, yeah. When I saw it on the display shelf at the front of the library. So it wasn't my fault, it was fate. This is The Burial Plot by Elizabeth McNeill. And this cover is so nice. And the end papers are very lovely. A little fox there. But this sounds really good. So it's set in London in 1839. So it says, these 2 tricksters, Crawford and Bonny, are surviving on wicked schemes. But one evening their fortunes turn. A man lies in a pool of blood at Bonny's feet, and now she needs to disappear. So Crawford gets her a position as a lady's maid in this grand house, and then I think she then starts to uncover secrets in this house. It sounds really good. It sounds gothic, and I am really, really looking forward to it. Then we'll talk, before we get to the fantasy, a random book that doesn't really fit into any of these genres, but that I want to read before the end of the year, is Seeing by Jose Saramago. This is translated from Portuguese by Margaret Jewel Costa. So this was first published in 2004. I've read one book by Saramago before, Blindness, which I really enjoyed. This one I've picked up secondhand, and I have 2 more Saramago books that I've picked up secondhand here. I feel like I need to read another one of these now before acquiring any more. So this one is, this is about, there's a national election and only a handful of voters have turned out. And then the final count reveals 70% of the votes are blank, not spoiled, but blank. And then they decide to repeat the election 8 days later. The result is even worse. 83% of the votes are blank. So it's about what happens when, I guess, people just stop voting. The authorities are seized with panic, declare a state of emergency. So it's going to be quite a political commentary, I guess. But I'm interested to see what Saramago does with this. I like his writing. I mean, he does not like a paragraph break, but I do like his writing, and I really would like to read that one before the end of the year. Next, we have fantasy. What is going on? So it's kind of a bit of a fluke that there's a fantasy section in this video. 2 of these books I've got out of 2 different libraries recently. And it's sort of chance that they've both come into my life at this point. And then there is a fantasy book which has been sitting on my shelves for a few years. And when I was putting this TBR together, I thought, well, I think it's about time I read this book. And that book is 1,000 pages long. We'll get to that one in a moment. I'll talk about the library books first. First up is Morgue by Terry Pratchett. First of all, can I just say this cover is really ugly. Like, Terry Pratchett's books have some really amazing covers. This is awful. Anyway, I have never read Terry Pratchett before, and I've been meaning to for a few years now because I've heard so many other people on BookTube talk about and really love his work. And then Anne-Marie from Actual Spinster did a video a few months ago now, partly inspired by me, about where to start with Terry Pratchett. And so I've been meaning to try some Terry Pratchett for a while, but my local library has like 3 of his books, which I think's weird. I was in Liverpool Library a few weeks ago and they had like 2 shelves full of Terry Pratchett books. It was quite overwhelming. And then I saw Mort and I was like, yes, I'm pretty sure Mort is a place you can start. I've heard other people have started the Mort as well. So I was like, I'm going to go for that one. This feels like a safe place to start. So this is about, death, I think. So I think Mort starts to work for the Grim Reaper as his apprentice. I don't know much more than that. But yeah, I'm interested to see what I think of Terry Pratchett. I think it's meant to be quite funny, is it? I don't know. I'm really not a fantasy reader, but like just that basic plot just does sound good to me. So I have kind of some hopes for this. I won't say high hopes, but I have hopes. The next one I am rather nervous about. This is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. So this is a super popular book. It's the first in a series. I think there were 3 books in the series. This is about lesbian necromancers in space. Everyone I've heard who's talked about this book has loved it. So, what makes me nervous is the fact that I have also heard that this is quite complex, and as a fantasy novice, I don't know how I'm going to get on with this. So yeah, I don't know. The fact that it's queer and the fact that so many people love it is what made me want to read it. And when I saw it in the library at work, I was like, yes, I'm going to pick this up. So I am going to give this a good go, but I am really nervous about it. I just don't know if I'm going to get on with it or not, but I want to try. And then finally, the 1000-pager, which has been sitting on my shelf for a few years. Now, I've meant to read this book since 2019. When I read the author's first book, when it was published, not first book, but the book that was published in 2019 that I read by this author. And then I thought to myself, I loved it so much. And I was like, oh, I'm going to read this book by the end of the year. Clearly it never happened. And we're now 5 years later. And I haven't read it. And it's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. So when I read Piranesi, I think it was published in 2019, then it won the Women's Prize the following year. Absolutely loved it. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to get this book at the library. I'm going to read it before the end of the year. I knew how long it was as well, but it never happened. And then I acquired this a few years ago, and I've not picked it up, really. I think because it's so long, because it's fantasy, makes me nervous. And also, I think it's the fact that I really want to like this book because I love Piranesi so much that has delayed me picking this up because I'm just nervous that I'm not going to get on with it. But I had a little look the other day on, like, read a few lines, and it does sound... I just don't know how complicated it's going to be, how many characters there's going to be, because I struggle when there's a lot of characters. So what's this about? It's set in 1806. England is beleaguered by the long war with Napoleon, and centuries have passed since magicians faded into the nation's past, but one remains, the reclusive Mr. Norrell, whose displays of magic send a thrill through the country. And then another magician comes on the scene, who is Jonathan Strange, who is the antithesis of Mr. Norrell, and then there's a dangerous battle between the two of them. I don't know. I feel like I need to give this dedicated time to give it a proper go. So I don't know when I'm going to read it, but I feel like I need to read it at a time when I'm not very busy and I can just spend a good amount of time really trying to get into it. So wish me luck for this one. So that's everything. That's everything that's on my sort of autumn till the end of the year TBR. I will almost certainly be reading more books than these. There'll be library books that I read. There'll be other books for like book clubs, maybe other books I pick from my shelves that I read. But those are sort of the core ones that I really want to prioritise and that I'm really excited to get to. So do let me know if you've read any of them and let me know what you're going to be reading this autumn. Okay, there was one more thing I wanted to say, which I forgot to say, which is I do have another reading vlog planned featuring some books which are not on this TBR. So that vlog is going to be a 5-star prediction reading vlog. I've got 4 books lined up for that. They're all books that I own and they're all books that I have acquired this year. So if you watch my book hauls, you might be able to guess what some of those books are that's going to feature on that video. There are 4 books that I think are potential 5 stars that I'm going to read before the end of the year, so we'll see. Feel free to guess down below what you think those books might be. But that really is the end now. So thank you for watching and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.